Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about the 25th season of the challenge, which is called Free Agents. So, I remember the first time I watched this season a year ago, I loved it and I had it as my favorite. And I don't know if I still have it as my top favorite at this point, and I'll kind of discuss why. So, the main thing that I really like about this season is the format, where there are some challengers where it was individual, other challenges where it was partnered, and other challenges where it was very large teams. And this even continued in the final. And it really added some unpredictability towards it, especially with how randomized everything was. And in addition to that, there was the kill card where whomever gets last essentially goes into the draw where you either pick blank cards, meaning you're safe, or you pick the kill card, which means you're going into elimination. This part I am kind of mixed on, and not really from a competitive point of view, but from an edited point of view, or when it comes to the editing. Since there are many moments throughout the season where people who end up having the kill card, they got no focus on the episode beforehand, but they get their main screen time right before the elimination or during the elimination, and some of these people ended up going home on their boot episodes. So I do feel like it caused somewhat of an edit imbalance throughout the season, and I definitely noticed that while watching the season. There are so many people who don't really have much to do, and I do think that a part of that came from the kill card format. The casting is pretty interesting. There were some returns, mainly from people like Laurel coming back. You also had Kahara and Isaac making returns after a long time off, but you did start to see a lot of the early era 3 people kind of falling. This would be Jasmine's last flagship season. The same thing with Frank. Chet had a poor season, though this was technically his late era too. Yeah, so outside of a lot of the early era C people kind of falling, it's the same thing with the late era 2 people, where we saw people like Chet and even Brandon kind of just fall. And this would be Brandon's last season up until 40, and that was circumstantial. And even people like Dustin started having a slow decline, or a quick decline, actually. So we had a lot of them kind of phasing out here. And even a lot of people who got some screen time in other seasons, like CT, didn't really have a whole lot to do. And kind of the same thing with Zach as well. Overall, it was interesting seeing some of the new dynamics take place throughout the season, and the stuff that does get focused on was really, really, really great. There was some drama in the season, for sure, but I definitely do think it's more competitive than dramatic, which honestly isn't really a bad thing. And it's not like it's one of those competitive seasons or competition focused seasons where there isn't any personality or drama. Overall, I definitely do think it is one of the peak seasons of the challenge, and it's one of the better Era 3 seasons. Cast is flying out to Uruguay for the season, and Emily is back after a breakup to redeem herself, which unfortunately never happens. Hurricane Nia makes her challenge debut, and that is really it for the notable intro confessionals. TJ announces that because it is the 25th season, where free agents means that before the challenge, it would be randomly decided whether it will be a team, individual, or a pairs challenge, but one guy and one girl will be sent into elimination, but everyone who loses will have to go down to the chance card, where if you flip the kill card, you are the other opponent in the elimination. But one man and one woman will win the entire season. $15,000 for third place, $35,000 for second place, and $125,000 for first. Swift is feeling cocky despite being a rookie. Jordan is looking forward to hook up as a single man. Jasmine is single for the first time on the challenge, so she wants to hook up as well, though that doesn't end up happening. Isaac comes back after like a 7 year gap, and he sticks out like a sore thumb. Chet is in a serious relationship with his girlfriend, and it seems like he, Devin, and Zach were plotting with one another. And Devin is no longer with Easy, thank goodness. Leroy is now a personal trainer and not really a trash man anymore, and Nanny is talking about how hot Kahara is, but she is also feeling Johnny, who is on the rocks with Avery. So, with the first three, we'll see more of that later on in the season, and with the latter two, we will see and get into that a lot more next season. Dustin is single And despite no longer being with Heather, he made an agreement with her about how he can't hook up with anyone on the season. We will talk a bit more about that later. A basketball game match plays with Teresa. A basketball match with Teresa and CT takes place where the other person has to take off their clothes if their opponent gets a shot, and Teresa feels really great about showing people what she can do, and this is one of her stronger seasons. Laurel and Carmuia are still good friends, and Laurel is going to dominate, despite taking a break over the last few years. Jessica and Dustin are vibing with one another, despite Heather telling him not to hook up, and honestly, it's kind of an awful thing to do. One, we're not together, but two, I can still control what you can do on the challenge, even though I'm the reason why you weren't on last season. It's just very weird and kind of possessive, in my opinion. The daily is at the World Trade Center, which is a team challenge, and out of a ledge is where they have to climb the 42-story stairwell. Then there is a puzzle at stage 2, and the people at stage 3 has to walk across the ledge to win the daily. Honestly, I really like the daily, and there's so many intricacies of strategy that is implemented here, but it is fun to watch. Jordan and Jessica have a little squabble about what she wants to do. Latoya gets gassed out and has to be taken to the hospital, but Team Black does win the daily, and I'm not going to go over everyone who's in these large ass teams throughout the season, it's just way too much. Latoya returns to the house and tells them that she was dehydrated, where she has a target on her back due to that and being a rookie, which Jasmine definitely points out. Some others talked about how Chet was a captain in the team challenge and screwed it up, which Laura points out. Where she says that coming to a consensus for the first vote makes sense, though some people want to send in Destin. Jordan and Johnny are clashing already, which is only a sign of what's going to come with them throughout the season. Latoya and Chet are voted into elimination, and TG tells them that everyone that lost will have to go into the kill class. Latoya rants about people being followers. I hate followers, and is tired of a bunch of the bullshit explanations that essentially mean nothing. Jamie and Frank end up pulling the kill card, so they are the other opponents in the elimination. Frank is shocked, but Jamie has a gut feeling where balls in is the elimination, which is a staple elimination. Chet ends up getting his chin split open, and it's a pretty deep cut, where it is bleeding. TG gives him the offer to get stitches after the elimination, or to get it now and forfeit, and Chet does decide to forfeit, since it is his face and he is a model. He mentions that he doesn't want germs to get into it and it gets infected, but you can tell that Frank is definitely bothered and apologetic about it all, since apparently he considers Chet a friend. Though I'm wondering if that's the case now due to their differing viewpoints. Latoya does win against Jemmy, though it was close and everyone is shocked at this, especially with Jemmy winning a few eliminations last season. Frank now feels good about having gone into an elimination and win, and Latoya is also more fired up now as well. So I don't blame Chet for leaving, since deep cuts like that are serious, and apparently they didn't even stitch it right when he did it in the ambulance vehicle at the animation. But clearly MTV and production had an issue with him leaving and made him look like a punk. Apparently they're having him host other stuff on MTV, and this held them on him, where he hasn't been seen on anything MTV since. It just seemed like production didn't think he was valuable enough to overlook this, and they saw him as an expendable punk. Jamie didn't do much in her only episode, and she was only really shown right before the elimination, which would be a trend this season that they really didn't like. Though it did suck that she was sent in due to luck, essentially, and not due to poor performance or politics. Anyways, this wouldn't stop her, as we will see her again, though the momentum from last season would never really recover. Kristen and Jessica are getting closer, and he's mentioning that Nani told him that she likes Jessica, and Nani is also speaking to Emily about Dustin, and Emily also likes Dustin. A party ends up happening with everyone wearing a bunch of costumes, and there's a lot of talk about how close Camilla and Nani are. We do see Jessica and Dustin making out in the middle of the stairwell, and Emily makes or takes her shot at Dustin as well, where she climbs in his bed and she kind of kisses him, and it doesn't really seem like he's kissing her back. Now, Auto Body Rarely is the daily, where they have to drive in pairs and driving a stick shift and then ride a bike together backwards, which is cute enough. And I did find this to be a fun dating. No one wants to be paired with Emmy, since they all know that she is shitty athletically. The four teams who are going into the draw, not naming the team since I don't remember, like I mentioned last time, are Frank, Nia, Swift, Jonay, Carmia, Teresa, CT, and Johnny, with Laura and Kahada winning the daily over Jessica and Leray by like 3 seconds. It is Kahada's birthday, and everyone is celebrating, where they make sure to give him a kiss and leave marks on it. Nani and Kahada have a nice kiss. Jasmine is getting close to Swift, though I don't think that ever turned into anything. And we also see Laura and Jordan getting close together, where we do see them making out, just like Jessica and Dustin. Emily is fine with Dustin moving on to Jessica, and CT is annoyed that people used his credit card or debit or credit card to buy all of the drinks. He freaks the hell out on Isaac, and it's not really a fight since Isaac doesn't really do anything back. And then we see Camilla yelling the hell back at CT, where they are starting to go at it right outside. Camilla has to be held back by Nani, where CT repeatedly calls her trash. Apparently, Camille gets too rough with Nani, where the two of them are getting ready to fight once they enter the house. Nani's extensions are begging to just fall out, and Dustin has to literally hold her back several times. They keep shouting at the top right corner, and then we skip 2 hours where Camilla and Nani are yelling at one another's faces in the bedroom, and Nani tries to punch Camilla. Anyways, Camilla and Nani do make up in the next morning once they are sober, and we see Kahara and Laura plot on who they should send in, and they decide to nominate Jonay and Dustin. They really don't explain why they chose Jonay, and she didn't really get any screen time up until this point. Frank is really sick at this point, and he has a bad feeling, but Nia is telling him that he's coming back to the elimination. It does seem like Nia and Frank are very close friends in this season, despite them not getting a lot of focus. Emily and Frank choose the kill card, so they're going into elimination. Wrecking Wall is the elimination where they have to punch holes in the wall and then climb it to ring the bell at the top. Janae does beat Emily very easily, and Frank and Dustin's elimination is very close, where Frank barely beats Dustin, and they share a few hugs, so I guess their rivalry from seasons ended. Momentum is very important, especially on reality TV shows like The Challenge, where people come back over and over and over again, and that gives them progress. Dustin had a big season with Battle of the Seasons too, and supposedly his girlfriend told him to reject exes because Cook was going to be on there, and they already hooked up. This caused him to miss out on getting close with and bonding and integrating with the veterans, and it made the transition very hard. He got lost in the shuffle when he came back to the season, but he did enough here to get another chance with hooking up with Jessica, though things wouldn't go well there either. Emily was a random ass returnee here, as her only season beforehand was 5 seasons slash 4 years ago, and she was the first boot there because she performed horribly in the challengers. She continued not being a good competitor, had a weird no match with Dustin, but there's just not much to say about her, and it's not like she had a huge personality here. It's really not a shocker that she never came back. Sahara and Nani are getting very close, and she sees him as a dream man slash husband, and we see them kiss even more. Sahara has a bachelor party being set up, and we see Jasmine giving a lap dance in her strip suit once again. Camilla is the maid of honor for Nani, and Johnny is the stripper for them, though he is nowhere near as good as Jasmine, in my opinion. But Nani is kind of feeling Johnny already. Frank calls his mother because he just visited the doctor, and I think his lungs are clogged up, but he doesn't know if he should stick it out or not. He is literally crying on the phone, but then we skip to the challenge where Frank is essentially pulled from the game because what he has is quote unquote contagious and has a viral infection, despite him interacting with the cast like normal and going to the club. So that is one of the reasons that pissed him off. So Frank did not like that he was DQ'd from the game, where he would have felt better by then had the producers not forced him to go to the club for B-roll footage, and what he had was not contagious. Due to this, he rejected their calls for the next few seasons, and they eventually stopped calling him once he was more open to come back. The toxicity he put out there for the last few seasons definitely kind of makes this moment riveting, and we could move on from it. But I'm definitely interested in seeing how he evolved or did not evolve in a decade, as his story does not end here, as he is going to be on All Stars 5, and he's not even hiding it at this point on social media, so he's clearly looking forward to it. I will say that it was kind of BS that they put him, but they kept Cara Maria, who was very badly injured in the season as well. Star Crawl is the daily where they are playing in teams of four as they have to walk across bars to get from one side of the wall that is in the air to the other, which is also in the air, and the two last teams are going right into the draw, with the first place team winning. The team with Brandon, Camilla, Jessica, and Bananas wins the daily, with Team Carmaria and Team Jasmine, I don't care to list who's on these two teams, are going to the draw. Camilla is thinking about putting in either Nia or Latoya, since they are both rookies that she doesn't have any ties to, so she does speak to each of them privately, where Latoya throws Nia under the bus for being a snake, as Nia apparently told Latoya that she wouldn't vote for her, but she did it in the first round, and Jessica is insistent on not voting in Latoya this time, as she apparently didn't want to do it last time. Johnny Riley and Nia are voted into elimination, so Portland is going in the draw for sure. Yeah, they're going into elimination for her. Essentially, the guy's elimination is cancelled due to no one pulling the kill card, and production kind of wanting to stay on schedule. But Carmilla does pull the draw, so she's going in elimination with Nia. Looper is the elimination where they are attached to a rope and they have to run towards the bell, but it's a long piece of endurance, and despite Nia being a lot taller, Carmilla does beat her, where it's a painful ass elimination that lasts like an hour and a half. And Johnny attempting to help Nia. Johnny Bananas, I mean. This is one of the first instances of audience interference that I remember taking place on the show. It is one of the better eliminations, I have to admit, but I do see why they made changes to it since Nia was apparently suffocating due to how tight the harness and stuff was. Honestly, Nia really wasn't memorable on the season. She did talk a bit of shit in her confessionals and still had that arrogant attitude, but she couldn't prove it in the challenges, which is still consistent today, as she is currently on Battle of the Eras as I am recording this. So like I mentioned earlier, apparently her harness was too tight and it almost caused her nerve damage in her arm with this elimination permanently. They did show her hook up with Leroy at the end credits of her Boots episode, and it was enough to bring her back next season, where she will have her most notable season, and there will be a lot to talk about with her there. Everyone is having a good time at the pool party, and we see people like Anissa getting annoyed with Laurel and Jordan, who are pretty much having sex and getting very intimate. Anissa complains about them sleeping with one another near her, and she's just over it. The cast is separated into two teams to compete in Bounce Out, where they're in huge balls and they have to run to either block the other team from scoring, and one person being the designated ball to shoot to get their ball into the net. And it's a pretty enjoyable, fun daily. Zach is getting annoyed with people's performances, mainly Isaac and Camilla, essentially, and Preston helps the red team win the challenge after being chosen last in every single daily that involves teams. People make fun of Leroy for being bodied by Preston, and he takes it in pretty well. And a bunch of people are talking about who to vote for either Brandon or Leroy, and Laurel wants Anissa in, since she makes too many promises. Actually, it might have been between Brennan and Isaac. I don't know if it's Leroy for sure, and I don't really care to go back at this point. Anyways, Jessica reports all of this to Anissa, and the latter is pissed off, where the two agree to not name one another, which obviously lasts. Anissa confronts Jordan about her name being thrown out there, and Jordan denies it, and she says that a friend of his started it. He's playing around with it, trying to skirt from the obvious, and Jordan does hold a team meeting. Laurel pitches for Isaac, though some others want the guys, but with the women. And Jordan confronts Jessica about telling Anissa information where Jessica hasn't done shit the entire time. That's what Jordan said. And Jessica calls him out for doing poorly in the first challenge. Both of them are arguing the hell out of one another and yelling at the top of their lungs, and she calls him inadequate, and it's a very funny fight, especially with their history from their real world season. Johnny claims to not have any respect for Jordan regarding yelling at women, while Johnny Bananas has done this several times before the season and after the season, so pot calling the kettle black is the understatement here. And Jordan mentions that Johnny is defending Jessica because he has no one else but Leroy. So even at this point, everyone just kind of assumes Leroy is just a plus one of Johnny, despite it not being the most prominent in the edit. In front of everyone, since the vote is about to happen, Laura is whispering to Seti, I believe, to vote in Anissa, and Anissa is livid at the blatant disrespect. As Anissa is getting votes, she calls out bullshit after every single person, and Anissa calls out Laura for pitching and campaigning instead of giving BS reasons, and Laura mentions that Anissa makes too many promises. Jasmine is annoyed that Latoya and Janae, her two friends, essentially voted for her. And it's a tie between Anissa and Latoya, and Jessica breaks her promise to Anissa, which I am so shocked. Anyways, it ends up being a tie once again, with CT breaking the tie and voting in Latoya, who does go in. Latoya calls out Jordan for being a fake ass bitch, says he did not give her a valid reason to vote her in. Leroy and Isaac get a bunch of votes, and it does end up with Brandon getting voted in, and he is pissed off that Swift turns on him. After the elimination, sorry, not the elimination, after the nomination, Latoya calls out Jordan as she tells his ass to run along, and Jordan is never one to back down from a fight. Laura walks in to defend Jordan to Latoya and Jessica, and she mentions that they both fought him back, so don't make it into a guy versus yelling at innocent woman thing. Brandon calls out Swift for turning on him in the most boring way ever, and he tells Swift that these people aren't his friends, so him doing what they want really isn't going to help him at all. Zach pulls the kill card, and Cara Maria does as well, for the second time in a row, where they are playing Oppenheimer, where they have to run around the case hallway to ring the bell on the other side, and it's essentially a circular, longer hall brawl. Cara Maria easily beats Latoya, and Zach easily beats Brennan, who were apparently friends. We end the episode with Anissa and CT complaining about how horrid and arrogant Laura and Jordan are, where Anissa is insistent on voting in Laura every single time. Latoya did not last long at all, but she was the most memorable rookie of the season, with her big personality, funny commentary, and getting into a lot of conflict. It seemed like there would be a lot more to come from her, or come from her in the future for bigger and better things pertaining to the show, but this sadly would be her peak, which isn't much of a peak at all. Brandon really did nothing memorable this season, and I feel like I've been saying this for his last few seasons, with him never lasting long in these seasons either, so it's a double negative. In general, there's really nothing there, and I see why this was his last season until his recent comeback, which happened in All Stars 4 and Battle of the Eras, which were still underwhelming. DT is helping Cara Maria train in the gym, and we also see Jordan and Johnny boxing one another, with Bananas thinking that Jordan did too much only to accomplish absolutely nothing. Piggy Bank is the daily where each person on a team has to cross over a bunch of ropes to make it from one platform to another. We've seen a variation of this challenge in many seasons in the past, and it's always a fun one. Team Purple wins the elimination. Whoa. Team Purple wins the daily, and we have Teresa plotting with some of the women, but Carmaria wants to send in Bananas since she doesn't like him. And Zach is just laughing at all of this and soaking it all in. Jordan joins the conversation and he is in support of taking out Bananas. Teresa is plotting to send in a strong woman and she wants Laurel to go into elimination, but Carmaria does not want to go in, so she pushes for Anissa. Ultimately, Carmaria doesn't want Laurel to go in, so she's pushing for Anissa. Ultimately, the winning team decides to not do anything else, but they do decide to vote in Laurel. Though Teresa herself doesn't vote in Laurel, despite masterminding this, and they also decide to throw in Bananas. With Jordan giving a very entertaining but very arrogant and delusional speech about Bananas has to earn his stripes since he hasn't been in elimination in forever. Devin calls out Teresa for planning the entire thing, but switching her vote, and she has no integrity, where Teresa feels like she is not owed anything, or Devin isn't owed anything. Devin tells Laurel that it was all Teresa's plan, and she had them do her dirty work. Laurel is excited that the elimination is balls in, where they have to get the ball in a basket in a physical manner. As soon as Jasmine hits the kill card, she crumbles, as she and everyone knows that she is doomed. And Jasmine also didn't get screen time before this. And Isaac picks the kill card as well. And he also didn't get screen time before this either. Laurel Laurel lets Jasmine get a point, which was very nice of her, actually. But obviously, Laurel beats Jasmine. Not to the same extent, but Johnny also easily defeats Isaac, with Jordan realizing that he's going to have to take Johnny out himself. Johnny makes a dig of Jordan's hand at the elimination, and the two of them go at one another when they go back to the house, where Johnny calls him out for not doing shit and how he's accomplished more than Jordan ever will, which obviously hasn't aged well, and how he did not appreciate his speech, where Jordan promises to tell Bananas, Jordan promises to send Bananas home himself. Isaac was a weird as hell returnee. He was an early boot on the Duel 2, which was like 6 years ago at this point, and he didn't really do much there, and he was still a weird early boot here, and didn't do much here. He is clearly supposed to be humorous, but I kind of just found him to be weird and borderline creepy, so I'm fine with him never coming back after this. I did like Jasmine's stripper moves that she showed in the first few episodes, and it's nice to see single Jasmine, though it ultimately led to nowhere, or at least according to the edit. But she's just too poor of a competitor, isn't getting into any drama, and doesn't have any screen time, so I see why she's done on the flagship after this. She would have stronger and more memorable showings on All Stars, so I'm at least grateful for that. Teresa speaks to Devin, and she mentions that Laurel hates her, but she always has hated her. And Devin is forgiving but not forgetting what Teresa did. It is Janae's birthday, and everyone is celebrating at a club, and Bananas is giving lots of props to Devin, where she knows that playing politics is the move for her since she isn't physical whatsoever. Anissa and Nanny make out with one another, and on the other cap, we see Jordan and Bananas arguing because Jordan wants them to shut the hell up, but CT takes in to tell Jordan that he has no credibility in the house and he better shut up telling everyone to not have fun. And it's a nice contrast between the two vans, just going back and forth just to see how different they are. Laurel and Jordan speak about how CT uses his intimidation to get to people, but Jordan won't let it get to him. Smarty Pants is an individual daily where they have to hold onto a rope and a platform where they are also entering trivia, where the first four men and women are going into the draw. And we've seen this daily many times, but it's always a decent one. We learn that Zach is obsessed with the Disney princesses. Leroy, Jordan, Johnny, and CT are in the draw for the men. Nanny, Jessica, Anissa, and Camilla are in it for the women. Zach and Devin win the daily, and Zach is bitching about Swift being an overconfident flop to CT, and Devin made promises to all the other women but Laura and Teresa to protect them, so she speaks to the both of them, and Laura makes her strategic list to Devin regarding who is her top priority, and Devin backs off from targeting Laura. Devin and Zach decide to throw in Swift and Teresa into elimination. Teresa is annoyed that Devin backstabbed her, and she hasn't been in this position in a very long time, so she is genuinely shocked by it. Looper is the elimination where they are tied to the ropes and have to run through a few barrels to get their belt across. And it's a different version of the elimination that Nia and Carmaria did a few episodes prior. So clearly they saw the issues with that elimination and made a few adjustments. We do have Camilla and Jordan picking the kill cards, and Jordan literally beat Swift within seconds, and it's one of the quickest eliminations ever. Things are getting more competitive with the woman, but Camilla kind of loses it to give up at the end, and Teresa beats her. Swift was pretty overconfident throughout the season, but it really wasn't played up in an entertaining way or really kicked up in the delusional element, so you kind of forget about him, and it's really not shocking whatsoever that this is his only season. Honestly, I do think this is Camilla's most forgettable season ever, despite her making it halfway through the season, so she isn't an early boot, but outside of her fight with Nanny in the beginning, there really isn't anything there, and she doesn't really compete very well here either, with her elimination being painted as her giving up. We start the episode with Jordan and Laurel making out in the pool, and Carmaria is happy that Laurel is getting some. Johnny is talking to Janae about how Jordan was hooking up with her last season, and he is now over Laurel, and he's just sick of Jordan's overconfidence. But it really doesn't seem like Janae cares at all. Teresa is trashing Devin to Anissa for backstabbing her, and is worried about her winning another daily due to the I already voted you in mentality. We have Johnny and Leroy talking about Leroy wanting to put himself into elimination, and we move on to the challenge, which is being played as individuals. Sausage Party is the daily where they are wrapped in saran wrap and they have to roll themselves to the circular bread while going through a bunch of obstacles, where the last three men and women will be in the drop. Laura and Johnny barely against Zach win the daily, and I believe it's Johnny Riley, not Bananas. Jonay, Nanny, Devin, and her wig, being ruined, covered in tomatoes, is also going into the draw. Jordan throws it because his friends are winning and he can control them, with Leroy and Preston also joining him into the draw. Laurel is going back and forth about throwing in Anissa or Teresa, two women who have pissed her off, and Johnny talks about wanting to throw in Bananas, since it is what Jordan wants, and CT is hoping that Jordan will volunteer himself. Jordan is a man of his word, so he is going to send Johnny home by flipping all the cards. Anissa speaks to Laurel to campaign, and she throws Jessica under the bus, essentially, and Laurel outright tells Anissa to her face that she's a terrible saleswoman, which I did find to be pretty funny. Laurel complains to Zach and Johnny about how Anissa complains about them not being friends, and Zach is over Anissa's paranoid game in general. Anissa speaks to Teresa about how her conversation with Laurel did not go well, and one of them is going into elimination. Anissa and Bananas are voted into elimination, which I'm sure no one is shocked by. Laurel does not talk Jordan out of going into elimination, which he is somewhat disappointed by, but Jonay is chosen to go into elimination, and Jordan flips all the cards, despite knowing that he will probably lose. The elimination is working well, and Anissa easily beats Jonay, and Bananas easily beats Jordan. Jordan is also disadvantaged here because he has one hand, and not two. Laurel approaches Johnny after the elimination, and he lashes out at her for choosing Jordan over him, when they have never had an issue with one another, and she does not appreciate Johnny for attacking her relationship, which he knows won't last, and it doesn't last. Jordan had a very interesting run this season, as he's the up-and-comer who wants to go against the big dog, and this will be the first of a few people who do this with Johnny Bananas. He had a romance with Laurel and brought a lot of drama. He brought one of the most memorable moments in the franchise, though it's really shocking that he performed so poorly in the challenges this season, when that's so not like him. He is also in the top 10 confessionals for the season, despite him only making it to the mid portion of the season. So it just shows how memorable he was and how much production liked him. Janae really wasn't memorable this season, though I will say that this season is the best that her hair has ever looked. She did win an elimination, but she was still very under the radar, and that was kind of the case last season too. But she does have one more flagship after this, or at least before her long hiatus, which is a lot more memorable than this season or even last season, but not for the better at all. Devin's wig, Tamara, is getting buried, and everyone is having a funeral for it. Devin's natural hair is much better, anyways, and I'm glad that she showed it off more this season. But it is a fun moment overall, with everyone definitely selling their parts very well. Leroy and Preston are speaking about the game and how the both of them are feeling so much pressure. Though Leroy thinks that Preston is kind of checked out of the game, and when you're checked out, that's when you tend to go home. We see Kahada and Nanny getting a lot closer to one another at the club, and they make out, but Nanny thinks that she's going to end up hurting Kahada, though he reassures her that it isn't going to happen. Literally, right in the very next scene, Nanny approaches Johnny as they're joking around with one another, but it does end up with them having sex, though she claims that she doesn't like Johnny whatsoever, though her earlier on commentary indicates otherwise. Johnny is gossiping with CT and Leroy about Nanny and Johnny fucking, since his cam-stained underwear is still on the couch. Sorry that I'm being pretty graphic, but it is what it is. Nani does tell the truth to Kahara about sleeping with Johnny, and he is over her at this point, despite her claiming her bad history with men. She blew away a chance with a good guy like him, and I'm essentially paraphrasing. Hold that pose is the challenge where it is in teams, but they have to hold onto a bunch of ribbons, and it is a pretty interesting daily to watch, where they have to hold their position for a minute. Team Devon, I don't care to mention or find out who is in the team, wins, and Nani rants about her situation to Preston, where she feels bad for making Kahara look stupid, and she regrets not talking to Kahara about their future. Men like Leroy, Zach, and CT easily decide that Preston's free ride is over, as they don't want a weak teammate in a future challenge. So they are nominating him, and Devin essentially makes a deal with Laurel, since she respects that Laurel is honest compared to Anissa and Teresa, and Laurel is insistent on getting out one of those two women. Anissa and Preston are voted into elimination, and Anissa complains to Teresa about how it's a unanimous round, and Anissa knows that she's going to go rogue if she comes back, and Teresa doesn't want to go against Anissa, but they both complain about Laurel some more, which definitely doesn't get old. Kahara does forgive Nani pertaining her hooking up with Johnny, and I do know they date after this, but it obviously doesn't last. Everyone else from the losing team has to go into the draw, and Laurel draws the kill card, so their feud can be settled in the elimination, and Kahara also goes against Preston. Oppenheimer is the elimination, and Kahara wins against Preston, despite it really not being a wash, and Laura wins against Anissa, though Anissa literally misses both rounds by like a millisecond, so it was very close. The episode ends up with Nani and Kahara cuddling one another in their beds. I wasn't bored by Anissa this season, which is an improvement. I did enjoy her petty little feud with Laurel and found it to be funnier than normal, but it really wasn't explosive, though I think some of her more memorable mid to late seasons will come from her next few appearances instead of this season. Preston was funnier than I remembered here and had solid performances, but in my opinion, the gas was out of the tank and there was nothing more to do with him, so Anakin's journey here on a somewhat high note makes perfect sense for him in my opinion. It was unfortunate that he apparently went homeless for a few years, or he went homeless a few years after this season, but hopefully things are better for him in general. Nani and Kahara are having a good time with him, putting makeup on her, and Laurel, Cara Maria, and Johnny are in the room, where Laurel is talking about how she is struggling trying to protect her, i.e. Cara Maria, Devin, Jessica, and someone else. And Laurel thinks that Cara Maria is annoying, so she needs to essentially shut the fuck up, and Cara Maria realizes that she is expendable. Johnny and Teresa complain about how Laurel is a bad friend to Cara Maria, and they tell her about it as well. Jessica and Nora are talking to Jordan, and Carmaria is jealous about how close the two women are getting, and she is annoyed with how loud they are as well. So things are definitely fracturing between the two of them. Dugout is the challenge where they have to transfer balls through the ramp, but it is played in duos. This challenge is always fun, and it's crazy how it changed from an elimination to a daily, like the last few seasons. Nani and Teresa and Zach and T win out of the pairs, Zach and CT. Sorry, I don't know if I said that incorrectly or not. And they talk about how Kahara is the weakest, and essentially Leroy isn't going to get mad about being thrown in, where Kahara and Jessica are the weakest people left of their gender. At the club, Laurel complains to Nani and Kahara about how she does not want to be friends with a child, but she is being very stubborn with this entire situation. Teresa tells Leroy that he is going to have to do some work politically to protect himself, and he also makes it clear that he wouldn't protect her. His biggest complaint about how he kind of just coasts politically, or that's people's biggest complaint about him, and he doesn't really do anything outside of winning challenges throughout his career, especially at this point. The winning four nominates Jessica, who needs to earn her stripes, as they somewhat still see her as a rookie, and Kahara. Jessica is shockingly calm before the elimination, and the couple of Nani and Kahara are worried about the elimination. But we do see them kiss here. The elimination is balls in, where Maria and Leroy picked the kill card, so they are the opponents. Jessica and Maria are shockingly competitive, but we do see Maria eventually win, despite Laurel cheating for Carmaria to lose and for Jessica to win, and Carmaria breaking her hand. And of course, Leeway washes Kahara in this elimination. Laura claims that she and Kamaria are not best friends since she has other friends in her life, and Nani is missing Kahara, but a bunch of the men are talking about how shitty of a friend Laura is. Kamaria is getting checked out by the ambulance, and she's hoping that she is not appalled. Jessica had her best season, and she did have a fiery personality, while performing better than I expected. At the same time, this is her only good showing, and things go bad for her really, really, really quickly, as she's never really able to win the dailies and get into much drama here like she did in, or will do in her other seasons. Kohato was a nice shocking comeback, and he did play pretty well in the season. I believe there's like a 5 year gap between his seasons and like a 7 year or 7 season gap as well. And I think this is his biggest season from a competitive and character point of view, as he also made it into the top 10 confessionalists, despite not making it to the final. He had his humorous moments throughout the season, and the showmanship with Nani was fine enough. I don't have a whole lot else to say about either of them. The others are talking about what happened to Carmaria since she never came back after the elimination, so people are speculating that if she was pulled or not. Though Laurel mentions that she doesn't care if Carmaria comes back or not, because they're in a fight, and Zach, of all people, has to call Laura out for being a bad friend, and Johnny mentions that she shut Kara down several times. Laura doesn't get why Kara would be mad about a trait of hers that was always there, and she feels ganged up on by the guys, so she leaves. Laurel has such a huge issue with accountability, and she likes to deflect a lot from her behavior. And just because you've done something from the beginning doesn't mean that behavior is okay. And there's really a sensitivity chip that is just missing overall. Carmaria does come back to the game, and Teresa is happy since she now feels closer to Carmaria due to the issues with Laurel. Zach reports everything back to Carmaria, and she rants about Laurel being a horrible bitch for cheering for Jessica. Laura does decide to be the bigger person after speaking to Johnny Riley, and she checks on Carmaria, who is mad that she isn't addressing the elephant in the room. The two of them keep on going back and forth, where Carmaria is annoyed that Laura won't say I'm sorry, as that should have been the first thing she said, so she's claiming that she's done with the friendship now. We actually do see Laurel cry about the situation in the confessional, so it is genuine, and Carmaria mentions that this behavior has continued over the years. And we'll hear more about this in 40 and Invasion. And the fact that this behavior has continued over and over and over and over again clearly just shows a very toxic cycle that needed to end. Crossover is the daily where they are in guy-girl pairings and they have to get the puzzle pieces in the water and assemble it, which is a fine enough daily. Carmaria decides to stay in the game despite the doctors not thinking that it is the best idea. They should have pulled her, and it's even more ironic based on what happened with Frank earlier on in the season. Nanny and Bananas win the daily, and Teresa is kissing up to the other people, which Carmaria finds to be very convenient and fake as well. It seems like Nanny and Bananas are thinking about voting in Carmaria, and we do see Leroy and CT talking about the type of elimination that it could be, where CT talks about not wanting to play the game emotionally anymore, which is probably why he was kind of under the radar this season. And it is interesting seeing Leroy and CT being very close this season. Nanny is going back and forth about getting rid of Carmaria or Teresa, as Nanny does not want to send home someone with a broken hand, but Johnny's mentality is that if Carmaria is ignoring her injury, then why shouldn't he? And honestly, he comes off like an ass in the situation, but you could somewhat understand his logic there, since she really should have been pulled. The pair speak to CT about why he should stay over Zack, and CT really doesn't give the bait at all, though Zack thinks that he's going up, since he has thrown Bananas' name as a target before in the season, and CT is actually close to Johnny. The pair do vote in Carmaria and CT into elimination, though Nanny does vote for Teresa before switching her vote to Carmaria due to Bananas, and it's being a tie, where if they tied again, they would have been in elimination instead. Carmaria does snap at Teresa for kissing Nanny's ass, and people thinking that she is being ridiculous, since it would have been done for Teresa to volunteer, but TJ shuts it down right at the nomination ceremony, and it's kind of annoying that he does this, but I do get it from a prediction standpoint. Teresa cries and rants to Devin, and she wants Kara to fuck off, and it's interesting how things turn around. Yua and Laura pick the kill cards, so they are playing in Wrecking Ball. Obviously, Laura beats Carmilla easily due to her broken finger, the latter's broken hand, and CT does pull a win over anyway, though Laura and Carmilla end their journey with a hug. This is yet another season where Leroy is kind of just there, and it's a repeated thing with him, but at least he made it close to the finals this season. He outright talked about not caring for the politics, which definitely makes him frustrating to watch at times, but he will be more important next season, or at least in his more immediate seasons after this. Carmaria definitely had a huge season, with getting thrown into several eliminations due to the kill card, and then there was her drama with Laurel, which was very captivating at this point in the challenge and in their history. It's literally one of the biggest underdog stories of the challenge. She wasn't expendable like she was in the last 3 seasons, essentially, and this is around the time where she became a main girl of the challenge, so it's definitely interesting to watch. TJ tells the cast that they're changing venues where they are going to Chile, where the final will take place. But of course, two more people will be booted beforehand, but it doesn't seem like the cast knows that at this point. Johnny tells Laurel that she handled the entire situation with grace, and she's feeling good about herself at this point, which is ironic because the men were talking about how she didn't handle it with grace whatsoever. But I guess it was mainly the other men compared to Banana, so maybe he's being genuine with this. Johnny Riley appreciates his luck throughout the season, with never going into elimination as a rookie, and we see the four men have a good time together. The cast is actually shocked when it's announced that they are not in the final, but there is a final draw, where CT and Johnny have to face in elimination together, and Noah and Teresa have to compete in elimination together as well. Puzzle Pyramid is the elimination where they have to complete a few puzzles in a row before climbing the pyramid. Noah beats Teresa, and Johnny beats CT. Teresa had a huge season here, where she got into a lot of drama, and we saw her political flaws become even more magnified here compared to last season, and she started competing a lot better here as well compared to her past seasons. I do think she made the season more interesting, but of course things will only get better for her. Though this was the closest she made it to the finals, naturally. CT was definitely on the background this season, despite being eliminated right before the final. It was an interesting change of pace since he was arguably the main character in all the era 3 seasons he was a part of up until this point. Though he did have that fight with Camilla earlier in the season. His friendship with Cameria was nice, but I didn't mind him being in the background here. The cast is sent back to rest before the final, and Laura is hoping that she finally wins, since she got second in all of her prior seasons. Nani is kind of scared for being in her first final, and she's really sad that Teresa left, which is interesting since things will change so much in a season and in like 6 months. Zach brings up Devon's performance in the season's final, and the entire cast bets on her not finishing, so she has to go to actually finish. The final starts where they have to be paired in all the guy girl pairings for the first 3 parts, and everyone is pissed that they will have to be paired with Devon at some point, or at least all the guys are pissed off. They are individual then for the final 2 rounds, where they have to go up a mountain. The kayak is the first round where Zach and Devin, Bananas and Laurel, and Riley and Nanny are paired. Tony and Laurel are first, Devin and Zach are struggling hard here, and they literally fall out of the boat where they have to be rescued by production, and it looks like Zach is about to drown as he's going down the current. Zach is blaming Devin for flopping the first stage, and it's only the start of his meltdown regarding his flop performance. Stage 2 is a 10k run before assembling a puzzle with tree stumps where Laurel and Riley, Bananas and Devin, and Zach and Nanny are paired up, with Laurel and Riley being first and Johnny having to carry Devin at several points, and he's trying his best to hide his frustration with her. Stage 3 is where they have to harness up a trail, being tied to one another and climbing it, with Laura and Zach, Riley and Devin, and Bananas and Annie being paired together. Zach is completely falling apart while climbing a bunch of rocks, where he passes out and starts. I don't even think it's a mom, but he's squealing like a female toddler, and Laura calls him out for how he treated Sam on the season's final. He wants to quit, and he picks a fight with Laura. A medic has to check on him, and he's annoyed that Laura only cares about continuing instead of his life, and he is taking absolutely no accountability whatsoever. TG tells them that the last two stages are individual, but they do have to ride on a tricycle in the night for an hour, and Nanny has a meltdown on the bikes because her feet are freezing. Everyone finishes long before Devon, and they are joking around with her being by herself, but she doesn't quit. It is the next morning, and they now have to climb a mountain, where they now have to wear their snow gear as they summit up the volcano, get the flag, and retrieve it to TJ. But he reminds them that if they quit, they do not get paid. The Johnnies are very close, though Riley wins the final round, and we see Devin and Zach performing really poorly. Laura and Annie are also neck and neck, even when they touch the flag. Adding up the points for all of the 5 stages, Laura and Bananas win the season, as Laura only beat Nanny by 9 minutes, with Nanny and Riley getting second, and Devin and Zach are at a very distant third, though they both finish for their pride. Zach was a lot more in the background this season, didn't really get into drama, and didn't have a storyline this season, so this is definitely the most likable he has been so far. But he's really remembered for how he guessed out in the final of the season, and it was brilliant to watch, though of course he took no accountability and his unlikability came back easily. But I wouldn't even say he was likable here, I just think he was less unlikable in comparison, because his edit wasn't as large. Devin was still a layup, essentially, and while she was a bit more political and social this season, I don't think that was why she made it to the end. But she was very humorous this season, and I like that she didn't give up in the end, though she had a bit of drama too. This was a good season to end on for her, since I don't think her luck would have continued had she done more seasons, and there wasn't much else she could give. But she is a regular commentator on the Challenge podcast, which does fit her best. Honestly, I don't know if I'm going to have a lot to say about Johnny Riley this season. He definitely had that weird hookup with Nanny and didn't get the rookie treatment at all, but his main thinking was looking out of elimination and almost winning the season. This was him at his most tolerable and borderline likable, and things would go downhill for him very fast in his other 2 seasons. Nanny definitely had her breakout season here, since while she still got into some drama this season, she did come off as more level headed and almost won free agents. And it was the closest she would ever get to winning. She definitely became a main character this season, though of course there was that whole mess with Riley and her showmance with Kahara, which definitely wasn't a good look for her. Johnny and Laurel winning were kind of foretold in the edits, but both of them had strong wins here. Both of them went into several eliminations, won their fair share of dailies, and storylines kind of revolved around them. Johnny had his feud with Jordan that made the season more interesting, and Laurel had her drama with Maria, Teresa, and Anissa as well. I don't think Johnny was particularly unlikable here, but I wouldn't say he was likable as well. But that's kind of just been my thing on him in general. Laura definitely came off as more multifaceted and layered this season compared to her past seasons, despite having that tough exterior and not being very nice, though she still wasn't likable herself. Overall, it's a very strong season for them both. So, this is the second reunion in a row that I do have access to, so I think from now on I'll have access to all the reunions, so I'm definitely happy when it comes to that. Johnny Mosley is back to host it, where the final is discussed first. Devin mentions that her heart got her through the final, and Zach talks about his cramps, despite people thinking that he was primed to win the season. And of course, he justifies his BS. Nani talks about the spider, and Laura pulls a prank on her, which is pretty fun to watch. Johnny Riley talks about his luck with the kill card, and Teresa's feud with Laura is mainly brought up. Laura does not consider Teresa a threat whatsoever, and mentions how she won her first elimination this season. And she's making fun of Teresa for taking so long to win an elimination, essentially. Teresa threatens to punch Laura in her face, so Laura literally walks up to Teresa's face so Teresa can punch her, and of course Teresa doesn't do it. Laura calls out Teresa's dirty game, and Teresa does not like Laurel's attitude. Devin calls out Teresa for being fake since she thought they made up, despite Teresa lying about her vote and propping people up, and she's annoyed that Teresa blocked her on Twitter, and Teresa apparently blocked everyone after the season because she disassociates and gets pissed. Honestly, I have to say that Teresa is very bad at arguments, and she doesn't really prove her points well at all. Johnny and Jordan's feud is discussed, and Jordan mentions that Bananas is the best, so he wanted him to go out. And Johnny mentions that Jordan didn't feel like that while filming, but only is claiming that because of what transpired, i.e., Jordan getting booted mid season and Johnny winning the season. Jordan mentions that Johnny didn't have most of his allies there, and Johnny doesn't like Jordan's attitude, where he lets his performance speak for itself, and Jordan needs to do that, as he's good even with one hand, but his ego gets in the way. And then, of course, Jordan's move is discussed. Jordan is standing down on his move, and Johnny mentions that it's dumb, since Jordan would have skated to the end otherwise. Jordan tries Jordan tried to see Laurel after the elimination, where they're taken to like the confessional room, I believe. Or at least that's what I think. And he got fined for trying to see her after that. Laura and Jordan's relationship is discussed, just like Kahara and Nani's relationship, in addition to Johnny's hookup with Nani. Laura and Jordan are still together at this point, though it doesn't last long outside of this. Nani and Kahara, it seems like they aren't together when they start talking about it, but they are getting there, though it seems like he asked to go steady at the reunion, and I guess she does accept, though I don't think this lasts long at all. Nani is annoyed that Johnny is butting in the conversation, though she didn't tell him that she had sex with him, but she used hooked up, since they were not in a relationship at the time. Dustin stopped talking to Jessica, and he apparently had another relationship at home. And I'm wondering if this is in reference to him going back to Heather, but I don't really know for sure. Laurel and Carmelia's founding friendship is discussed, and they are happy to do the season together. But there was a blow up in the van between them that wasn't shown, as Laura was snapping at production, and she was tired of all the condescending digs that she, i.e. Carmaria, was receiving from Laura. Apparently, Carmaria was jealous of Laura for hanging out with other people, and Laura apparently got Carmaria a gift, where they supposedly make up, which, of course, does not last, and we'll talk about that in Invasion and even in the later seasons. So I think the strongest element of the season is the format, where you really had to hold your own to last throughout the season, whether you're in teams, whether you're in partners, or whether it's individual when it comes to the dailies, and anyone can be thrown into elimination, especially if you lose the challenge and if you have a kill card. So you really needed to compete to hold your own. At the same time, I do think that it made the edits pretty imbalanced due to the people who get the kill card wouldn't get a lot of screen time before that or throughout most of the episode, and if they go home, they kind of just leave without a bang. I also think some of the casting wasn't the strongest, with some weird returned and quite a few people who ended up as deads. But this was around the time where the real world was starting to wind down, and a lot of the late era 2 and early era 3 people were fading in the show. And I think they knew that these two things were issues, which is why the next few seasons were cast in the way that they ended up being cast in, which we will definitely talk about more in the future. In general, the people that did get a lot of screen time were entertaining. They had a lot of interesting arcs and comedic effect throughout the season, and there were some interesting dynamics here that definitely carry over more and more. I don't know if it's my favorite season, just due to some of the editing and the weird casting choices, or just me enjoying some other seasons more than this, but it's definitely a very strong season overall. So we're in the middle of Era 3, and it's interesting to see how much changed. Most of the Era 2 people ended up being gone by this point, whether they were early to mid Era 2 or late Era 2, most of them were gone. And a lot of the early Era 3 people didn't have as much longevity, as many of them had to run for the first half of this era, but they wouldn't appear again. And when you really think about Era 3 and the people who debuted here, you think about the people who debuted in late Era 3 instead of early Era 3. So it definitely makes sense. So the next few seasons will have a few changes. They clearly saw the issues that was happening with their casting pool in this season, which is why next season is the first season to cast from a show that wasn't the real world rules, or even Fresh Meat, where they started introducing people from Are You the One? And that was a very controversial choice at the time, and it would lead to them eventually casting from any other show in the future. It also would cause things like Bloodlines, where they wanted to get a new casting pool, and it was somewhat of a fresh meat, but it was nowhere near as successful. And they definitely tried pulling in a few of the last remaining seasons of the real world, but there was only so much they could do from there. Overall, the season is definitely a lot of fun, but it's not a heavy meal type of season that kind of just makes your stomach full. It's probably still going to be in my top five, but I don't know if it's my favorite. But when I rank all the seasons, that'll be interesting to look through. Thank you all for watching the video, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!